Those of you that have followed the channel for a while will know that I will do absolutely anything I can possibly do to keep myself warm and dry so that I can keep riding over the years. I've tried everything from the obvious things like shoe covers down to silver foil and putting my feet even in carrier bags. More recently though, I've tried some winter shoes. The Physique Arctica R5s that I tried last year have been an absolute game changer, and recently I have been trying out the Shimano MW5s. Now these sit at the lower range of the two winter SPD shoes that Shimano make. These are the MW5s, they make an MW7. The MW5 you can find online for between 95 and 120 pounds, and the MW7, the upper range of the two shoes, you can find between 150 and 180 pounds. Before we get too carried away with numbers though, let's get out on the bike for a bit of a test ride. So admittedly, whilst today's weather isn't exactly horrific, in fact it's a really fairly nice dry day, albeit cold, these shoes have been already put through their paces in terms of some pretty horrific mud and puddles whilst I've just been riding off-road. To be honest, as you'd probably hope, there's absolutely no sense of any mud, water or anything getting into these shoes, and whilst it's a fairly cold 4 degrees today, my feet are definitely warm. I'm only wearing very thin merino Endura socks, which I absolutely love. I wear them pretty much all the way from autumn through to mid-spring, and they're not super thick, and I have sized up a little bit on these MW5s by a half a size because I want to be able to wear thicker socks for the very worst weather, but they don't feel too big or baggy, which is good for me because I've got very, very thin feet. In terms of fittings, there's loads of different options in terms of where your SPDs go, both fore and aft. If you want them a little bit further forward or more in the midfoot, the options are there. And I think one of the most surprising things, really, considering the sort of cheaper nature of these boots, is how solid and stiff they are, particularly when you're out the saddle. And my experience is that when you buy cheaper shoes, even the Physique Arctica R5s, there's a lot more flex in the sole of the shoe than you really want. These are really stiff, pleasantly so. Not so stiff that I'd imagine 4 or 5 hours riding with these would be agony, but there's none of that sense of give you get in the midfoot when you get out the saddle that I've had with particularly Physique shoes at the cheaper end. And they're eminently more comfortable when you have to hike your bike than a lot of other MTB shoes that I've worn, despite the fact they don't have stud screws at the front of the shoe. Now, as soon as I got home, like everybody else, I immediately washed my bike. You all wash your bikes as soon as you get home, right? I saw this as an opportunity to put my boots through a bit more of a test, and once I'd cleaned the bike, I decided to give them a bit of a drenching, initially just over the upper, pretty much where you'd expect the rain to land, and then further up onto the cuff. And I found that the cuff, whilst getting a little bit wet, didn't let any water run inside the boot. To be absolutely clear about this, there was absolutely no water inside my boot. My socks were completely dry. I was walking around inside the house, no wet socks, no divorce. So these boots completely pass the most important test for any winter boot. They are completely waterproof and completely windproof. The MW5s are made with this dry shield material, whereas the MW7s are fitted with Gore-Tex. Now, I looked into dry shield because I couldn't find out a great deal of information about them. They're made by a company called ITM. They're 100% windproof, they're 100% rainproof, they're breathable, they're environmentally friendly in terms of the way that they're made, and they're also recyclable. As a fabric, the upper material ticked every single of the most vital boxes. Now, as you saw from the video clip earlier, one of the things I was really surprised about was the stiffness of the sole of this boot. Now, when I reviewed the Arctica 5, one of the downsides about this, and I put this down to price, was the stiffness of the sole. If you have a look at the flexibility in this sole here, you'll see, hopefully you'll see, that the flexibility is running right behind where the cleat is, i.e. in the midsole. However, with the MW5, when I press the flexibility down, you can see it's the toe that's flexing. Now obviously when you're hiker biking, these are the bits that you need to be flexing, but when you're riding your bike, the stiffness needs to go through this midsole through here. To say I'm impressed with this would be a massive understatement. One of the major differences between the MW5 and the MW7, aside from price, is the Gore-Tex upper and the fact that it has this Torbal torsion system between the outer of the shoe and the middle section of the sole. Now in my opinion, I wouldn't ever want anything more from the sole of a shoe than I'm getting from this one. The flexibility I get in the toe box and the stiffness through here. One of the other things I mentioned about the Arctica 5 was the lack of reflective elements on the shoe. Now obviously most of the time we're going to be riding these shoes in kind of winter weather. Now just take a little look at the 360 reflectivity between the two shoes, the Arctica 5 and the MW5. As you can see from this video, the reflective nature of the MW5 over the R5 is quite impressive. And let's face it, it's the sort of thing you'd really want from a winter boot. Putting them on is super simple. Now, I'm assuming most of you could put your foot in a boot. We'll start with that. All you then need to do is tighten up the laces. Now, be a little bit careful not to over tighten them, as I've said before. One of the worst things you could do is cut off all the nice warm blood circulating around your feet. Then you put over the cuff around the ankle from the arch side to the outer, and then the opposite way around from the outer side to the inner, and finally you pull the main shoe cover over. You may need to faff around a little bit just to even it all out, but ultimately, as my friend Katie said, they look bloody good. Super comfortable, super snug and super supportive. One of the only major downsides I could find between the Arctica and the Shimano is that the Arctica is around about 100 grams lighter per shoe than this one. This is around about 500 grams, this is around about 400 grams. Now I have to say I would trade in that 100 grams difference because the two things that I talked about with the Arctica 5 in terms of negative elements were the reflective nature of the shoe, or lack of it in this case, and the stiffness. Now I argued in terms of a cost issue with this shoe at the time, and these have come down to being nearer to the price of the Shimano shoe. However, this shoe has nailed both of those things. Super reflective, super stiff, but flexible enough to be able to hike a bike. Now there is also a similarity between the Physique and the Shimano. This is the insole from the Physique, this is the Shimano insole, is this Roubaix finish. Now it's really, really lovely and snug on the inside. However, one of the things the Physique does have over the Shimano is this fantastic reflective sole that the Shimano doesn't have. Now that is easily rectifiable. I have got a survival blanket that I could contact adhesive some of this to the bottom of it. Would have been nice to see them copy the idea of the reflective nature from the Physique in a sole. So let's keep this summary super simple. The two most important things are how windproof and how rainproof these shoes are. Well, these and these are both fantastically windproof and rainproof. However, the two elements that I didn't like about the Physique in terms of the stiffness of the sole, well, this is beyond excellent in that regard. This midsole so stiff, and yet the flexibility in the toe box gives you that ability to walk in them really, really super comfortably. Plus also the reflective nature of the 360 reflectiveness all the way around. The only downside of this shoe is that they don't make a road version of this. In my opinion, it's a 10 out of 10 boot. I literally cannot think of any way of improving this shoe, and I can't imagine how the MW7 is any better. Perhaps next year I'll buy a pair and give them a try. If you've enjoyed this review, make sure you leave me a comment below. Let me know what winter shoes you're riding in at the moment and what improvements you'd like to see on that. Give me a thumbs up and make sure you hit the notifications bell, and I will see you on the next video. Thanks for watching.